So, this episode is a replay all the way back from November 7th of 2019. And believe it or not, it is still very much relevant today, even more so because in 2019, we had or no one had heard of COVID-19 and all of the additional fraud and the increased fraud that would have happened as a result of that. So I'm going to go ahead and replay this, but I'll give you some updated dates. So I talk about Charity Fraud Awareness Week for 2019, but Charity Fraud Awareness Week in 2021 was October 18th through the 22nd. So just this past October, a couple weeks back. And then I also talk about the date for Giving Tuesday. And the date for Giving Tuesday is always the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And so this year in 2021, it is going to be November 30th. So keep that in mind as I talk about the dates from this replayed episode. Those dates are 2019. The dates I just gave you was 2021. But again, the tips, the resources, all still very accurate. So enjoy this replay. Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by the 5-day Vendor Master File Cleanup. Do you trust the data in your vendor master file? Well, if you need to prepare for a vendor self-registration portal or for 1099 and 1042 IRS annual forms distribution, you are in luck. We have vendor validations including watch list screening, duplicate vendor review, vendor inactivation recommendations, and more. Go to DeborahRRichardson.com. That's DeborahRichardson.com/consulting, or email me at Deborah, DEBRA, at DeborahRRichardson.com for a quote today. So Giving Tuesday will be here before you know it. It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, December 3rd. So what do you need to know to research and validate charitable organizations so you don't send Crooks your company's intended tax-deductible contribution that is supposed to help those in need? Keep listening. Welcome to episode 56, Charity Fraud. Don't send crooks money on Giving Tuesday. Charity Fraud Awareness Week this year was October 21st through October 25th. And if you didn't have a chance to follow it during that week, you can always check out hashtag Charity Fraud Out on social media to make sure you didn't miss any valuable tips. But also, I want you to listen because I do have educational and validation resources for charitable organizations so you don't send crooks your company's intended tax-deductible contribution that is supposed to help those in need. So we'll start first with the charity fraud education and activity resources. And I have 3, and here is where you can go to make yourself aware of the same things that you would have learned with charity fraud awareness, but going into a deeper dive. And also you can learn about some scam alerts as well. So we'll start with the first one. The first one is the Fraud Advisory Panel. Now, this panel is actually responsible for Charity Fraud Week. It's been in existence since 1998 and is itself a charitable contribution or a charitable company that was established in the UK. It's a group of volunteer members that are governed by a board of trustees, and they work together on a mission to give advice, education, collaboration, and research focusing on those that are affected by fraud. In 2016, they had their first Charity Fraud Conference and their first Charity Fraud Awareness Week. Now, since 2018, the Charity Fraud Awareness Week went international, and that's actually when I found out about them. I did my first blog post about them last year in 2018, and I'll put a link to it in the podcast. But that's when I found out about them. So for me, I've been celebrating Charity Fraud Awareness Week for 2 years now. So if you're looking for advice, education, collaboration, and this is not just for those looking to companies that want to donate to these charitable organizations. It's also for the charitable organizations themselves to check out how to avoid fraud within their organization, and that includes internal fraud as well. The second one is the Federal Trade Commission, and the FTC provides information to educate the consumer as well as businesses on how to avoid falling for phishing and other fraud schemes, and this includes charity fraud. They do have a report on new scam alerts, and it's listed on their website, and since September 11th, they have reported 6 new scam alerts, including the one following the devastation of Hurricane Dorian back in September. And as you know, we've had last year, it was the same thing. I think it was Hurricane Michael. So we have again this year Hurricane Dorian that can affect Giving Tuesday if those crooks or cyber criminals want to take advantage of it. And then, of course, we do have those California wildfires going on. So I'm sure we are going to see some new scam alerts pop up related to those as well. Now, the third one is the Internal Revenue Service, or the IRS. And just like last year, and in collaboration with the Fraud Advisory Panel, the IRS created the Charity Fraud Awareness Hub. It contains help sheets, case studies, and webinars to help prevent and detect and respond to frauds committed against charities. Now, many of the resources are aimed at helping charitable organizations. However, the information that it contains is applicable to the givers as well. Now, you'll need to register, and just because it's no longer Charity Fraud Awareness Week, you can still register and get access to all of that information. And for all 3 of those, the Fraud Advisory Panel, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Internal Revenue Service, I will leave links to those in the show notes. All right, so now that we have some information or 3 resources for education and activity resources, now let's look at charitable organization research and verification resources. So if you are a accounts payable team member or leader and you have received vendor setup documentation for a charitable organization for the purpose of a tax deductible or some type of a donation, these are the resources that you can use in addition to the normal validations to verify that charitable organization. And we'll talk about each and what they provide. Now, I do have 5. And the first one is actually also the Internal Revenue Service, or the IRS. And I also had that down as a education and activity resource. But the IRS has a tool called the Tax-Exempt Organization Tool. And that is formerly known as Select Check. So those of you that have been around like me for a while, you remember their Select Check. Well, here you will need the tax ID number and the legal name, and once you search the IRS database, you will not only confirm whether the contributions that your company is pledging are tax deductible, but you'll also confirm that the charitable organization is real. Now, I wouldn't replace this with the IRS 10 match system that you're already doing on the W-9 that you hopefully collected from the charitable organization. Use it in combination with that before you set the vendor up in the accounting system and ERP. And just know that if you do use a tool like 10check.com, then that tool will do both. In addition to validating the legal name and tax ID combination against IRS records, it will also check and show you in the results if that charitable organization has a match on the tax-exempt organizations tool. Now, if you want more information on how to utilize that tool, I did have a podcast from last year, episode 3, because it was my first year. So episode 3, Fake Charities, How to Protect Your Vendor Master File from Fraud. I did include a detailed instruction of how to use that IRS tax-exempt organizations tool. So the next one, number 2, is the Better Business Bureau. So the Better Business Bureau has set up a separate site, give.org, where you can search your charity. Searching the charitable organization's legal name against the Better Business Bureau's database provides a report that covers the activities of the charity. It also indicates whether the charity is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Now, the report covers things like governance, measuring effectiveness, finances, fundraising, and other information. And so it's a full report that you can print or download, or you can even share it. So it's all that public information. Now, the report also includes complaints that are processed by the Better Business Bureau in the last 36 months. And as an example, I don't know what these complaints are, but I put in the Red Cross for the Washington, D.C. Location, and it's saying that there were 4 complaints. There were 2 of them were telemarketing, 1 of them was mailing list removal, and 1 of them is program services. So I don't know anything about complaints in the Better Business Bureau, but if in research you feel this is something that your leadership should be aware of, I would bring this to their attention in case that affects their willingness to donate. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about the American Red Cross is that they are accredited by the Better Business Bureau. All right, so the next one is the Charity Navigator. Now, this organization's purpose is to allow consumers and businesses to give smarter. So you want to search by the legal name. They also give you the option to search by the tax identification number to find their current and historical financial, and then also the accountability and transparency ratings, as well as an overall score and rating. You can also find their IRS Form 990s on this site as well. What's interesting about this site, if I search for the American Red Cross again, is that it'll tell you based on year the number of volunteers they have, the number of disaster responses they've responded to, and then the number of services that are provided to military members, veterans, and civilians. So I don't know how important that is to, setting up a vendor and making sure they're a real vendor. But one of the other things you can definitely use is if you find a valid charitable organization on the list, the report will provide the valid EIN so you can compare that to the W-9 that you collected. All right, the next one, number 4, is Charity Watch. Now, Charity Watch is an independent charity watchdog, and search this site with the legal name and you will see their Charity Watch grade as well as the amount that they spend on programs relative to overhead, and also the dollar amount that it costs to raise $100 of contributions. So again, using the American Red Cross as an example, they spend 89% of their dollars on programs relative to overhead, and it cost $31 to raise $100 of contributions. And again, I don't know anything about whether that's good or bad, or even about their Charity Watch grade and what goes into that, integrating the charitable organizations. But just like the other ones, the report may contain some information that might be useful to leadership. Now, it also rates the charities and provides their total expenses as part of a governance and transparency section, in addition to providing salaries, analyst notes, and articles and alerts. So the last one, so I started this with federal at the IRS level, and then I went to 3 different separate organizations that actually provided a little more information than the IRS did. They have their own scorings, they have their own ratings, and they provide, in some cases, the IRS Form 990s, but they've collected information on these charities that may be good for research. Now, the last one, I started with federal, I'm going to end with the state. So the last one, number 5, is you can check with your state, because most states require charitable organizations to register in order to ask for donations. Now, the site lists the contact information for the Attorney General for each state, and you can click your state and follow the instructions to determine whether that charitable organization is registered with the state. So again, both the federal and the state, you get minimal information, but those 3 organizations, the Better Business Bureau, the Charity Navigator, and the Charity Watch, will have additional information that they've either collected from other sources or they also have their internal rating systems. So I hope that was some value to you, giving you some resources for educating yourself and your staff, and also doing some verification so that your company's tax-deductible contributions actually get to a charity that can help those in need. If you have any other tools that you use to avoid sending those contributions to Crooks, please comment on the platform that you're listening to this podcast on. And by the way, I'm on them all. I'm also on YouTube as well. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 56th episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.